The PlayStation Store is running yet another flash sale. We just covered the Pub Party sale that's also going on right now, so if you want to take a look at that sale, check out our video from yesterday. This flash sale, in my opinion, is far better than the Pub Party sale. Both of them are going on right now, so you can really pick the best of both worlds, so it's pretty nice. And in this video, we're going to be going over 10 awesome deals as a part of this PlayStation Store flash sale. We've got some great games at great prices, so let's get right into this. First up, we have Dragon Age Inquisition Game of the Year Edition for $9.99. Dragon Age Inquisition was probably the first truly great RPG released on the PlayStation 4. That's not saying all too much because it was released in 2014, just a year after the launch of PlayStation 4, and honestly, when comparing it to some of the later RPGs such as The Witcher 3, Dragon Age Inquisition does fall a little bit short. However, it's still a great RPG with a solid story and great gameplay. It does lack in some areas, and again, if you're expecting the best RPG of this generation, you're not going to find it here with Dragon Age Inquisition. However, the Game of the Year Edition does include a slew of DLC, and for just $9.99, you are getting a load of content for your money. Next up, we have Firewatch for $4.99. Firewatch was one of the more notable game releases. It came out back in February of 2016, and at the time of its release, it gained a lot of traction. A lot of people were talking about the game. It's a game that a lot of you guys have probably forgotten about, especially if you picked up your PS4 more recently. Firewatch isn't one of those games you go back into the vault and pull out. However, it is a great story-driven game with an awesome art style, one of the best art styles in all of this generation, and again, while the ending was a little bit unsatisfactory to me, overall, I was very engrossed by the experience Firewatch had to offer, and at just $4.99, that's 75% off. I would recommend you to check it out.
Everything's fine, just getting some fresh air.
Well, escaping isn't always something bad.
Someone broke in.
Hey, what?
They wrecked the place.
Next up, we've got a couple of PS2 on PS4 games with the Jak and Daxter Bundle for $15.99. Now, $15.99 for PS2 games is a little expensive, but bear in mind that this includes Jak, Jak 2, Jak 3, as well as Jak Combat Racing. All of the games are really solid. Personally speaking, Jak 3 was my favorite. First Jak game was a little bit more on the cartoony side, and I felt like Jak 2 ramped it up by a great degree. All of the games are really solid platformers, and even the racing game is pretty good. Of course, with this bundle, with it being on the PlayStation 4, it now runs at 1080p, it's got trophy support, so a lot to like here. One of Naughty Dog's games that they don't get credit for, but Jak and Daxter was a fantastic series, and the bundle for $15.99, that's $4 a pop each game, that's well worth it.
Got you now.
Hang on, Dax. It's gonna be close.
Next up, we've got Journey for $5.99. Journey is another one of those very iconic PlayStation titles that a lot of people at this point have forgotten about. It was originally released on the PlayStation 3 back in 2012, and then the PlayStation 4 version came out years later in 2015, and it was developed by that game company who also did the tremendous Flower. Journey is once again a very artistic and engrossing experience, and you'll find yourself emotionally moved by the end of it, and that's saying something. Not a lot of games will actually tug at your heartstrings, but Journey is definitely one that does that. It's got a great soundtrack, and keep in mind that Journey is all about artistic presentation. There isn't some immense revolutionary gameplay here, but that's not what the game aimed for, and at just $5.99, it is an experience that's a must-have. Next up, we've got Nex Machina for $5.99. Whenever I can talk about a Housemarque game, you know I have to give it credit. I'm one of those people that have gushed about Housemarque for years because they are a tremendous studio. No, they don't create AAA big budget experiences, however, their downloadable arcade titles are top notch. They did Super Stardust HD, they did Dead Nation, Matterfall, and Nex Machina was another one of their titles, being a twin-stick shoot-'em-up. This game is very stylish, a lot of fun, and it's always engaging, and a lot of replay values here as well. If you've been a fan of Housemarque's other titles, you're gonna love Nex Machina, and at just $5.99, well worth the pickup here. Next up, a very iconic indie game in Rogue Legacy, which is down to just $4.24. Rogue Legacy still to this day is one of those indie titles that gamers fawn over because it is a fantastic game while also being very difficult. A game that was really helped popularized by Twitch streams, but it is an absolutely addicting game. Now, if difficult games are not up your alley, then you might want to stay away from Rogue Legacy, as the difficulty might be a little bit of a turnoff to you, but if you can get by that and the fact that it's just $4.24 now, I would highly recommend you to check out Rogue Legacy if you have not yet. Next up, we have a great survival horror game in Soma for $8.99. Soma is a game developed by Frictional Studios, and if you don't know who those guys are, they also did the Amnesia games, which have become some of the most iconic horror games, but in my opinion, Soma is actually a much better game than Amnesia. Soma itself takes place on an underwater remote research facility where machinery begin to display characteristics of human life. It is such an atmospheric game that really absorbs you into the experience, and while the gameplay again isn't super enticing, rather it's all about survival and actually getting by, but I feel that style of play really works in a horror environment, and it works doubly so in Soma, and of course the narrative is top-notch in this game as well. If you've yet to check out Soma, $8.99, still a little bit steep of a price point. It did release at $29.99 years ago. I would still say it's very worth it at that price. Next up, I've got a deal that whenever it's available, you have to mention it because of how good it is, and that's Titanfall 2 Ultimate Edition for just $5.99. I've talked about Titanfall 2's commercial disaster over and over again, so I won't bore you with that speech again, but it looks like over the years, Titanfall has resonated and found a little bit of a cult following. Maybe it's because so many of us that played the game and enjoyed it talk about it in such high regard, but it is a tremendous multiplayer first-person shooter and far better than the first Titanfall game. The first Titanfall didn't even release on the PlayStation 4, but Titanfall 2, you've got a single-player campaign in there, unlike the first title, and it's actually pretty good, and the multiplayer has so much more depth to it, and of course, with this being the Ultimate Edition, you're getting more content on top of that. You've got mechs, you've got an engaging first-person shooter. It's a formula that really works, and hopefully at some point Respawn does stick with the franchise and bring out a Titanfall 3 because the potential is still there for this series to be big. And at just $5.99, you're doing yourself a disservice if you aren't checking out Titanfall 2. Next up, we've got Tomb Raider Definitive Edition for $8.99. Honestly speaking, I would like to see Tomb Raider a little bit cheaper at this point. I mean, this game did release back in 2013 on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. But hey, maybe I'm just being really cheap because for $8.99, this is still a great game. The Definitive Edition on the PlayStation 4 is much better than the PlayStation 3 version. You've got the extra content there, and the base game itself is really good. While it is only around an 8-hour experience, it's a quality 8 hours that definitely doesn't stay past its welcome. With Shadow of a Tomb Raider releasing this year, if you've yet to check out these Tomb Raider games with this title and Rise of a Tomb Raider, you've got to get on that. And while Shadow of the Tomb Raider does seem to feature an immense amount of downloadable content, which I'm not a fan of, I'm sure it'll be a really solid game from a fundamental standpoint regardless. But for now, check out the Definitive Edition of Tomb Raider for just $9.
For a child, you've caused me a great deal of trouble. She's the one.
I made a promise.
And finally, another game that I always go to bat for, one of the most underrated JRPGs of all time, not hyperbole there. Valkyria Chronicles Remastered is down to $11.99. Man, Valkyria Chronicles is such a great strategy JRPG. It was originally released back in 2008 on the PlayStation 3, and it just completely flopped stateside. While it was received well from a critical standpoint, commercially it was a different story. Luckily, it did receive a second win with Valkyria Chronicles on the PC, and then eventually Valkyria Chronicles Remastered on the PlayStation 4. 4, and it seems like at this point Valkyria Chronicles has gotten the justice it deserves. We are getting a Valkyria Chronicles 4, and that will be coming stateside, so that's super exciting. And if you want to understand what all the hype is about with Valkyria Chronicles, well, check out Valkyria Chronicles Remastered because it's excellent. You've got a great art style, an awesome story that's really engaging even if you're not a fan of Japanese RPGs. It's an easily digestible story that even if you're a fan of Western experiences, it's a war story. It's super easy to understand, super easy to get yourself engrossed into, and you're gonna have a great time with it. Now, the story is told in an interesting way through the use of a storybook. Got cutscenes in there, but it's not like you're exploring this gigantic world or anything like that. But the style of play in Valkyria Chronicles Remastered is so unique, and everything comes together to just create a great RPG experience. And even being a strategy RPG, if you're not a fan of those games, again, Valkyria Chronicles is one of those games I feel like you can get into because the gameplay is just so top-notch, and I can't say more good things about it. Now, Valkyria Chronicles doesn't often go on sale on the PlayStation Store, so this is one I would highly recommend you to pick up ASAP, because who knows when it's gonna go on sale again. But at $11.99, a lot of content for your money, and just a fantastic RPG with an excellent story.
Entering combat. Gotta love me.
So that's going to conclude this deals video. This flash sale is really great. A lot of good deals. Some of the top deals. Again, all of these I would recommend, but Valkyria Chronicles Remastered for $11.99. You just heard me gush about that. Great deal. Titanfall 2 Ultimate Edition for $5.99. Can never go wrong with that for a solid first-person shooter. Journey for $5.99 is great, and Firewatch for $4.99. If you haven't checked that out yet, I would recommend you to do that as well. That wraps up this video. Sound off with your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.